we can kick off this webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. I see that still people are coming in. Thanks also Professor Richard Keegan and Nigel Thurlow for joining us for our session today, and of course also my business partner Marco Baldini. I just wanted to do a few slides just to introduce this webinar and of course the argument of today and the reason why we do it, and then we'll start off asking our two guests some questions. So let's say we are here from Spark Innovation Catalyst. Spark is a small Italian consultancy boutique, but with a global presence, I would say. We always are proud to tell that we have lean and agile in our DNA, and those are, let's say, also the principles and values that we use in our work. The reason that we started doing these webinars because we are organizing a very nice summit in Florence on the 11th of October. And you can see here that we have a tremendous lineup. We have Dave Snowden, we have John Shoup, we have Nigel Thurlow, we have Richard Keegan, we have Andrea Furlan, we have Roberto Ranzani and John Turner. And apart from those fabulous speakers, we also have a number of companies that are going to show, let's say, their testimonials. They're going to show their cases on which they have been working. And that is basically also the philosophy of the summit that we are trying to organize. We have been participating, we've been co-organizing a couple of summits in the past. And for me and Marco, what always has been, let's say, the key of those summits is that we create an opportunity for people like us to stay together, where we can share experiences, share applications, but of course also share problems and share questions. And let's say we create the opportunity to actually speak with each other. We can for sure learn a lot during the week, during the day and during the week. But maybe even we can kind of elevate, let's say, the argument that is also dear to us. So to talk about the summit of today, we have two speakers. We wanted to give you the guys the opportunity to already get to know them a little bit before you actually are, let's say, participating also at the summit himself. Today, let me introduce them. We have Nigel Thurlow, and Nigel previously served as the first ever Chief of Agile in Toyota, where he created Scrum the Toyota way and also co-created the Flow system, which is a holistic flow-based approach to delivering customer-first value built on the foundation to what we all know, the Toyota production system. And Nigel is an expert in organizational design, an author, a speaker, and also, let's say, serves as a consultant to the industry. And maybe start immediately off with a question to you, Nigel, but before you became Chief of Agile in Toyota, you actually worked another time in Toyota before, right?
Yes.
And, looking back on those two experiences, what, let's say, made Toyota so important to you for also, let's say, the work for which we know you nowadays? Why is Toyota so important?
Well, I mean, I often tell the story when I first started working in Toyota, and this was back in Europe, in Belgium at TME, Toyota Motor Europe. For the first 6 months, I used to go home every night and threaten to resign because I thought the people were bonkers. I'd been working as a project manager for years and as a technical guy, as a technical engineer in the software industry and sort of the electronics industry, and I'd been working in various different projects and initiatives for many years, and then I went to work for this place called Toyota, and from day one I started to realize I knew nothing. And I would go home every night, and I'd had years in industry, and I'd go home every night, and I really did threaten to resign every day for 6 months. And then suddenly it clicked. It was like, oh, that's what it's all about. And I suddenly realized I had to completely relearn everything I'd done for years because I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. I still don't know that much, but I've learned a little bit on the journey. And I describe those first few years in TME as the best professional training of my entire career. And they actually paid me. They paid me to be trained. It was amazing. And so that knowledge just became transformative for me. It completely changed my career, completely changed the direction I went in. And over the years now, it's enabled me to do some of the really cool things I've been able to achieve and to help a lot of people. And truly, the education I got through the Toyota years, right up until I left at the end of 2019, in many different ways, has been absolutely formative, and really just directs the things I do now from day to day.
All right, thank you so much. And next to Nigel, we have Professor Richard Keegan, and as he said many times, please call me Richard. So Richard, thanks also for joining us today. And Richard is a specialist in the areas of lean and world-class business and benchmarking. And he advises some major companies here in Europe. And he's currently working with the Welsh government, if I'm correct, and Toyota in introducing a tiered lean approach to develop competitiveness for the Welsh companies. And he has led many best practice missions, even maybe over 2,000 managers, which is a very high number, to the Toyota D-side engine plant, as well as leading missions to Toyota Japan. And he's also an advisor to the world-class and lean activities of the EU-Japan Center for Industrial Cooperation. And so also I see Toyota has, for you, played an important role in your career. And you've been studying many years, let's say, best practices. What made, let's say, Toyota so special, and why did you, let's say, kept on going back to them, and also bringing a lot of, let's say, managers from Ireland and from Europe to visit those plants?
Really, I suppose that it starts that I'm an engineer by basic training, by profession. And as an engineer, you're always trying to understand and break things and make them work better than they did before. So when I took the role, and it's purely voluntary role with the EU Japan Center to support their learning activities and their world-class activities, I got exposed to some phenomenal companies right across Europe and in Japan. And I worked for nearly 30 years for the Irish government, trying to help Irish companies improve their competitiveness, their productivity, their efficiencies and effectivenesses. And every plant I went to, I heard, and we have the Bosch production system, we have the BMW production, we have our production system. And what's it based on? Well, it's based on the Toyota production system, but it's our version of it. So as an engineer, I prefer to go to the real thing than to go to a copy of it or somebody else's interpretation of it. And through a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, I managed to get access to the engine plant in Deeside in North Wales. And as I was just saying to Nigel before we started the actual seminar itself, I am not working for Toyota for 13 years. But over that 13 years, I have engaged very strongly with my friends, the team members within TLMC, what became known as the Toyota Lean Management Center. And I talk about friends, the joking is ridiculous. It's real boys stuff. The constant effort to try to improve is real engineer stuff. Can we look at it again? Can we look at it again? Can we look at it again? So I'm not what would I say, a fan of Toyota for any other reason than, from what I have seen, they probably have the best production system in the world. They don't just have a production system, they have a Toyota way. They have a shared understanding of why they're doing these things. Mm-hmm. And Nigel, you said the first couple of months you didn't get it. You can't get it until you understand why they're doing it. And when you understand the why, then you can understand the how, and then you understand, oh boy. Now, in all of those visits, and literally, I think last visit was my 92nd visit to the plant. I was over there the week before last. I brought Irish people and European people to see the plant in Deeside, because the plant in Deeside was in English speaking, English written, easily understood, absorbed by English and Welsh and Scottish and Irish, some Irish, trying to translate the Japanese thinking into European environment. So I reckoned if people hear, they will, go back to the Tao. I hear, I forget, I see, I believe, I do, I understand. So my work in the government, I created a three-tiered approach to help companies get better. And part of it was support and consulting, and part of it was seeing what good looked like. Now, good, and literally a world-leading plant, is located 50 miles from Ireland in North Wales. And through a lot of effort and good luck, we developed a partnership, a relationship, friendships with the team in TLMC. And we have brought literally thousands of people to visit. Why? Because if you can understand what they are doing, internalize it, make it your own to suit your own circumstance, then you can do something to improve your own operations. So it's not about copying, it's about learning.
I just want to, Bastiaan, I'm sorry, I just want to mention something. It's two reasons. That the first thing, it's not about copying. That's crucially important. People go out and copy Toyota. They copy tools, but they can't copy the behaviors. And they wonder why it doesn't work, because it's all about behaviors. That's one of the key things I learned. It's all about the human element, the human factors, the people part. But the other thing, I just want to smile, because Richard just talked about the Toyota Lean Management Center. I want you to say that again, Toyota Lean Management Center. I have all these online debates with people and all this online abuse I get because people say Toyota never used the word lean. Oh, yes, they do. It's not a banned word. It's just that all the people who've never worked at Toyota believe Toyota never used the word lean. There's a few Toyota folks who'll say we never use the word lean, but lean is okay to work, because the concept of lean thinking predates Toyota. It predates the first use of the word lean thinking by Womack and Jones in The Machine That Changed the World. The concept is a concept, but it became a dirty word for reasons I have no idea why. So I just think it's absolutely awesome that he mentioned TLMC. It's just shuts all the critics up.
The second thing will blow your mind, right? I worked for the government, and we were known in the press as the employment agency. Now, we never employed anybody. We employed a few people. I was one of them. But I was the guy who said, we need to introduce lean into Ireland. Now, when they Googled lean, they saw job reduction, headcount reduction, loss of jobs. And I said, no. If we can understand good practice, if we can have more of our companies using good practice, they will create value, and they will create a demand in the marketplace for that value that they've created, whether it be from the creative process through to the manufacturing or service delivery through to the post-sale interaction. I said, trust me. No, I didn't say trust me. I'd actually proven it in a pilot, right? As far from Dublin as I could get. So if it didn't work, nobody would know. You know that I'm not a fool, Nigel. I'm not a fool. I might be a fool, but I'm not that much of a fool. But my senior director, the chief executive, Frank Ryan, allowed me the opportunity to try it. And his subsequent chief executive, Julie Cinnamon, allowed me to continue to deploy it. And when I retired, we had 1,153 lean projects supported in Irish companies across the 3 different levels, and literally quantifiable billions in savings and thousands of people trained. We're now doing a version of that, an iteration, a Kaizen version of that, with the Toyota Lean Management Center team, with and for the Welsh government.
Wow.
Just beautiful, Bastiaan. I'll go back to you, but I mean, this is just amazing stuff to hear. It truly is.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned a couple of times competitiveness. As let's say, so what do you think, let's say, are the managers and the companies that you brought to Toyota in terms of competitive? What were they looking for? Why did they wanted to visit Toyota and, of course, understand how Toyota does it?
Okay, firstly, competitiveness is a complicated thing. So being an engineer, I simplify it down. How can we be more productive? Mm-hmm. How can we be more effective with our resources, whether that be the design team, whether it be the manufacturing team, the procurement team? How can we do what we're doing more efficiently? Because if we can reduce our effective cost by doing things more efficiently, we are more competitive in the marketplace. and the sales team can either reduce the price and or sell additional features at the same value and or have degrees of axis of movement. So I go back to Krugman, Paul Krugman, when he said that productivity isn't everything, but at the end of the day, it almost is. So that allowed me to say, guys, we want to understand where we are currently in terms of our performance. So I was asked, I led company benchmarking for 4 years at the request of the European Union, at the Commission. And it was around, can we get some real fact and real data to see where is Irish companies performing against European norms, our first target market. So you'll be laughing again, Nigel, fact and data, right? But you know, here's some facts, here's a mirror, look at it. See, actually, Richard, you don't have hair. Here's the facts. So we were working with our companies in Ireland trying to create this understanding of the need to do something to get better, which would lead to an improvement of their competitiveness. And that led us then to say, well, actually, we can show you what good looks like, but we were doing, as I said, a 3-tiered program. We didn't bring everybody on the programs over, but we said there's a place where you can go where you will see things that to a normal person are ridiculously good. So we were creating the desire in the companies in Ireland to want to get better and want to see what good looks like. So we created a local visiting program with the EU Japan Centre, European visiting program, and then to Toyota, you can come to Toyota and see what's going on. And literally 2,000 plus, including the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach of our country, visited Toyota in Japan and was taken around a personal visit by the board director responsible for engine production. The chairman was in America and the chief executive was in Tokyo, and they apologized, right? So
Nice.
that was it.
And I mean, with regards to our summit on the 11th of October, we talk about, let's say, the age of complexity, kind of indicating that times are changing. And you said boiling it down, what competitive means is getting better in terms of getting more productive. Do you see that, let's say, in the last years or maybe in the last decades, actually, let's say, there's a change in what companies make competitive?
I started off by saying I was an engineer. Now, many of you probably don't even know what this is, Bastiaan. A slide rule. Did you start with a slide rule? I know Nigel had one, right? Watch Apollo 13 and watch when they say, Houston, we have a problem. All the guys in the back rooms with their slide rules. Yeah. They were our early calculators. And you could get to very high levels of accuracy with 3 little pieces of moving plastic. Now, over my engineering life, we've gone from using bits of plastic through to, wow, you've got a programmable calculator, through to Sinclair QLs and Commodores, through to ridiculous ability to be able to talk across the globe, irrespective of time and location, and we don't think anything about it. We're now living in the Star Trek world, almost. Once we get the warp drive sorted, we're away. I have a problem with us saying today's engineers are faced with really difficult problems. They're faced with their set of problems, but by God, we had difficult problems.
True.
They have different tools now, and they can use those tools to address the problems they have today. Now, I challenged one of my MBA, well, actually 2 different years at the executive MBA classes to look at complexity. And quite often, complexity is a factor of how we organize ourselves. Sorry, Nigel. I'll shut up.
No, I was celebrating the comment. This is happy hands, happy fingers. You know, this is me celebrating on. This is how we cheer on webcams. But it's just exactly what he's saying. So I started off with slide rules. My dad taught me to use a slide rule when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And then we used to have things called log tables and things, and all these books full of numbers to calculate stuff. I mean, I'm nearly 60, you know. It's exactly sounds like the kids of today have no idea. I sound like my dad now. But so the thing is this, that and what Richard was just saying about complexity. So a year or so ago, I was doing a conference for the Lean Institute in Poland, and I thought I'll have a bit of fun. So I created a slide and I put Nigel's law and I said a proposition, because, you know, everybody's got a law, Brooks' law, Conway's law, somebody else's law, Little's law, all these things we're familiar with. And I said all organizational complexity is human derived. If you take the humans away, are the problems truly complex? And that was my test for that. Because Rick, you talked about things being complicated. Excuse me. We can have challenging problems which need expertise and tools, techniques, methods, approaches to figure them out. But when we actually think about complexity, we think about things that are not solvable through reductionist techniques like root cause analysis. You can't just go apply 5 whys and solve climate change, or solve, you know, asteroids hitting the new telescope, the Webb telescope that got hit by a meteor. Now, these are novel events. These are truly complex things that happen, for which there's no simple solution. The pandemic was a really good example of a complex problem, and we started to move from this sort of chaos. Well, it started off in this complete state of confusion and abhorrence, this sort of abject confusion, descended rapidly into chaos, and tried things out, mad experiments, just tried things out to see what would happen, and gradually moved through complexity. And I think we're still sort of hovering around the complex area at the moment. We truly don't have a simple solution for this. We can't go and apply 5 why and then figure it out and we've cured the problem. Although we've never cured the common cold, so maybe it fits into that category anyway. But everybody likes to say things are really, really complex. It's like this whole fascination with digital transformation now. And I was having a conversation this morning and I said, when are you going to digitize my food? Because there's this obsession with digitalization, which is this fancy word the consultants made up, McKinsey or somebody, for making everything digital nowadays. But I sort of said, you know, digital is an enabler. It's a tool, it's a technique. It enables you to accomplish an outcome. The digital isn't the outcome. Profit isn't an outcome, going back to what Richard was talking about value and customers and the sort of the whole culture around Toyota. So and the fact we want to reduce prices for our customers, not make bigger profits, and we do that by reducing costs and getting better at what we do. So these things are outcomes which are a result of the way we do work. And so, but what now people are trying to do, and I think actually we've made things more complex by introducing too much in the way of technology. I'm sorry, Bastiaan, go ahead.
No, but actually, because let's say, I mean, so basically what we're saying, let's say the Toyota production system and how we're studying Toyota, let's say that is a very, very a good best practice. At the same time, we're also saying that the challenges that companies are facing nowadays are not necessarily more complex or more difficult than they were maybe 20 years ago. And I'm trying to play a little bit devil's advocate here, but I think at the same time, everybody, of course, knows or remembers COVID, which still is not gone. Probably we still remember, let's say, the evergreen that was kind of blocked in the Suez Channel and putting a huge stress on many supply chains. I mean, today it's difficult to get a new car because some component cannot be supplied. So, I mean, do you still believe, let's say, that, you know, going ahead in the same direction and using, let's say, the principles of lean and the principles of the Toyota production system, let's say, are still holding in
but
this?
Bastiaan, please now, please, right? If we look at companies on the broad spectrum, some had an absolute disaster when COVID hit, and some sort of had a bit of a hiccup when COVID hit. Some had to stop lines a year ago. Some have only had to stop lines last week. Right? Some sort of said, at some stage, we might talk to our suppliers as people we actually like, or we want to engage with. Others would say we will never talk to, we will always get the last cent on the price. So there's a spectrum of ability, there's a spectrum of approach. And when we look at the automotive sector, yes, it can be hard to get a car, but many of the automotive companies are recording very high profits at the moment. So you'd have to ask, where is the balancing point?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I like motorcycles. Look, the motorcycle I like is called the Honda Gold Wing. And when the Evergreen got stuck in the Suez Canal, obviously the meme artists, the cartoon artists immediately showed the gold wing towing the boat straight again out of the side of the canal, right? Had to be a gold wing. I'm sure everybody who likes Land Rovers, it was a Land Rover, it was whatever your own vehicle was, it was all of those smart ones came out. All the Toyota production system does, all that's at the basis of it, is creating the ability in the people to identify and fix problems. The problem doesn't matter. All engineers are trained to be problem solvers. And what I clearly believe after this 19 years not working for Toyota is that they really do try to build the ability of their people to look at problems, to look and see the problem, try to understand, to think and do. Now, they're my 5 words. They're not Toyota words. Look, see, understand, think and do. I never understood PDCA, by the way, but that's just me, right? And that's what they're doing. So if we don't have to look at the problem and try to fix a problem for business today and in the future, then there's no reason to talk about TPS or Toyota Way.
You know, I'm going to add something to this because I can explain PDCA to Richard. I'll set up a meeting for that. That's not a problem. I know Deming didn't invent that, but that's a different conversation. But let me talk about a couple of things, because I hate the phrase best practice, by the way. In Toyota, there's no best, only better. So good practices, current best practices, established practices, things that work well. I'm okay with all those phrases, but we always want to push for better. That's the whole ethos of continuous improvement. And we talk about companies companies are now making a profit. I just read this morning that American Airlines have made this massive, huge profit. Now, I'm currently working in Washington State in the US. I'm helping a company out. I live in Texas, and that's about 3.5 hours flight between Dallas and Seattle. Typically in the front of the plane, in the posh seats, in the bit more comfortable space, it's about $500 return. American Airlines, and I'm not making this up, you can go on their website and check on the date of this recording, $3,350 return for the same fare that 6 months ago or 8 months ago was $500. And even before the pandemic, it was around $500. I actually flew with Alaska Airlines, half that price, but that's still $1,700 for a flight that would normally be about $500. That's the wanton greed that's taking over. But the biggest problem with a lot of industry is it's a wanton greed industry. You talk about the ship got stuck in the Suez. You talk about the supply chain problems. You talk about even companies now struggling to produce. You look at what Tesla are doing at the moment. They've just hiked their prices multiple times in the last couple of years. He just hiked his prices again because he's losing money. I'm talking about Mr. Musk here. He's also laying off staff. He's also trying to get out of the Twitter deal. And there's a whole bunch of other news about the things he's doing financially at the moment, because it's all about the Benjamins, baby, when you're in the USA. But this is greed. And so what happened was all these companies pushed. This is what Ono used to call supplier bullying or bad Kanban, and I call mean lean or evil lean. We pushed the problem so far away from the borders of the USA and other countries that when the supply chain had a hiccup because of the pandemic and all these other things, suddenly you couldn't get things. The supply, everything was in China or other Far Eastern countries or in India or Africa and places like this, and suddenly we couldn't move the goods and services. But what we didn't use just in time as it was designed. We didn't use Kanban as it was designed. What we did, we just pushed everything away to make it cheaper, you know, so we could make more profits. We could, and this is the antithesis to the Toyota way and the Toyota philosophy. It's not about making profit. Profit is an outcome, a result. It's about delivering value to a customer. But what most companies do is shoved it all away, and they decommissioned their ability to create value onshore, locally, nearby, and they also didn't hold any inventory because, hey, we're just in time, but just in time became just too late or just not enough. And the thing is that was because they just designed their systems badly. They copied the idea And as Richard said earlier on and alluded to, they use lean as a cost reduction method, but as a people reduction method, as a facility reduction method, at the cost of the service they deliver to the customer, where what we're trying to do is reduce the cost of creating the value, but to use our people more effectively. That's the whole principle of Jidoka. We want to use our people more effectively within our organization and use the technology and the capabilities where it makes sense, but we don't eliminate the people. So there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up in that, and this is why a lot of people fail with lean thinking, emulating Toyota, because they use it as a greed creation system or an inventory reduction system. I sometimes call it, are you doing JIT or IRS? Because IRS is the tax office in America. So you're doing just in time or an inventory reduction system, and that's the problem. They just don't. They use it for the wrong purposes, the right tool, wrong purpose.
So Nigel, so if I understand correctly, you're basically saying, let's say, the key principles and the core values of TPS and of lean are indeed very, very valid, and also like Richard's saying, because in the end we teach people how to solve problems. But the risk is that maybe, considering this complex times, that we kind of forget about these principles, or at least not, let's say, company-wide we apply these principles. And thinking about a phrase that you coined, Scrum the Toyota way, was this also, let's say, a little bit linked? I mean, did you see that, let's say, the Toyota way in somehow needed something extra for which, let's say, you call the Scrum the Toyota way?
So this enables me to answer Richard's question on PDCA, because first of all, it was wordplay. We started introducing Scrum, if you like. The major thing I did, or the major piece of work I was asked to do, was to train people extensively, about 4,500 people in the end across Toyota in lots of different places, and teach them this concept of this Agile concept from the software development world and what this technique called Scrum was. But if you actually look at all the Agile Manifesto, the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto, and you look at the people who developed Scrum, all their influences are from Toyota. And Ken Schwaber will tell you, one of the creators of Scrum will tell you that Scrum is based on the Toyota production system, an empirical process control from DuPont, from a professor called Professor Tunde, and they worked that, and Ken Schwaber's brother was working at DuPont, that's the connection. And so they studied the empirical process control at DuPont, and that was added as a planning technique in Scrum, but the fundamental principles came from Toyota. If you talk about cross-functional teams, multi-skilled teams, well, the phrase in Toyota is multi-skilled workers. You know, I mean, older phrases now because of the age of the company, but that's the whole concept came out of Toyota. Now, the whole concept of Scrum is basically PDCA with time boxes, and people scream at me when I say these things, but I've got used to that now. But essentially, PDCA is a rapid iterative cycle. Form a hypothesis, do an experiment, check the results, decide what to do next. I mean, it's an empirical process. Now, in Toyota, it's really used as a deductive process. You start with some facts, and Richard mentioned facts and data earlier on. As Ono used to say, he says, I like data, but I prefer facts. And the reason for that is facts are fundamental things that are just like Richard says, I have no hair, you know, I've got glasses on, that's a fact, yeah, that's just a thing. Whereas data can be manufactured and synthesized to produce whatever result you wanted to say, lies, damn lies, and statistics. So so from that point of view, I went into Toyota to teach them how to use Scrum and to show them that actually it's not lean and agile, it's lean and agile. Yeah, these things are symbiotic, and one is based on the other anyway, but essentially Scrum and predominantly the agile practice are a planning technique. It's a planning cadence. And what we're trying to do is, instead of, and I'll tell you, as I tell many people, the challenge with PDCA, even in Toyota, was they didn't time box the different steps. So you've got this plan, do, check act. And it was unequally spaced. There was too much time spent planning, a lot of time doing, but then the actual checking and acting was brief if it was even done. And so what they did, and as I mentioned earlier on, that most PDCA cycles are deductive. You start off with some facts, and based upon the facts, you form a hypothesis and you have a plan to do something, and you see what the results are. But then I started to introduce the fact that if you truly wanted to be empirical, you needed inductive reasoning, which was just observational. Now, as Richard will testify, when you're in any plant or any facility in Toyota, you spend most of your time observing. You're looking, you're watching. I mean, I spent the last 2 days in a factory in a plant near Seattle in Washington State with my iPhone recording production lines, standing there for hours making recordings and observing, and then going back. And he's done all this, of course, this is what we do, and put it on the computer and then stepped it through time, cycle time, seeing we can make takt time, watching the process flows, watching where the bottlenecks were, watching when things went wrong, and even slowing things down and analyzing every frame. This is observational, and from that I can form a hypothesis. And then the other one is what we call abductive reasoning, which is just that gut feel, that sort of, I just wonder, I've got no facts, I've not seen anything, but I've just got a hunch. So that's the logic of the hunches. Let's go try that out. So I introduced some of this thinking into what PDCA could be used for. And in fact, that you didn't have to start at P and end at A. You could start at D or C or any of these points, because the entry and exit points, and even Deming, when he talked about his later version called PDSA, Plan, Do, Study Act, he said that the entry and exit points weren't fixed. So you could start your experiment or start the doing or start the checking and then continue from that point. So what Scrum does is it actually time boxes those. It says we have a maximum duration for planning, a maximum duration for doing, a maximum duration for checking, and a maximum duration for acting. So it brings some discipline and some structure around it. When I taught this to the folks in the plants, the real people who actually build the real value, the people who build the cars and other things within the Toyota world, they just got it. It just clicked. It just made sense. They understood that. It was harder in the non-manufacturing elements, when you're in the sort of the knowledge work industry and the offices and things, because a lot of them had never done the Toyota training. So the first thing I did was put all my team through TPS training, Toyota Way training, and they even did TBP and JKK, which is the problem solving, TBP, Toyota Business Practices, and JKK, Jikoto Kanketsu, which is about learning how to define process and continuously improve process. So they went through all this training so they understood. And then as part of my training on Scrum and these Agile techniques, I started to retrain the Toyota production system stuff. I started to bring in stuff from the Toyota University, the TPS material, and actually started to combine them and show the symbiosis between them, and to start training all these people away from the plants about what Toyota really means, what the essence of Kaizen really is, and this problem solving, because that's what Toyota people are. They are problem solvers. It's all about the people. And we started to bring this training together, and we started to bring all these Agile concepts, which are really, as I say, born out of Toyota. So we're just sort of, hey, we renamed these, but it's the same thing. And we brought these things together and started to train this as a holistic thing, and it became immensely popular, especially with the folks in the plants or the people I trained that supported production lines and things, not the people on the lines themselves. And it just became this cool phraseology. Are we doing Scrum the Toyota way, or are we scrumming the Toyota way? And so it just became this thing, and we did win an award for it. I was very proud of that. The work we did with Toyota Connected and the work we did across Toyota, we won a World Agility Forum award for that, which was awarded to Toyota, not to me, but to Toyota, for the work we'd done with Scrum the Toyota way. So it was a lot of good fun.
I find it really intriguing how you're both saying basically is that, let's say, at Toyota itself, or companies, let's say, that do lean, or let's say follow the Toyota production system in their core, and maybe in their production environment, they can be really good. But once you get a little bit further away from that core, it can be that those principles kind of get less present or less known, and as a consequence, you can see now it maybe that more complex environment, that indeed those companies in the end suffer. And so I was also thinking a little bit, and Richard, I would like to get a little bit back to you, because you've been doing a lot of benchmarking, studying companies, and writing books as well. You've been writing many books, and one of the books that inspired me is the one about the 5 rings. So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that also there you're trying to describe that, let's say, it cannot only be maybe we do lean or we don't do lean, but it gets basically to a more complete level. You have to get it really into your DNA, or you have to absorb it as a company or as a person altogether. Am I correct? Was that the direction that you were taking it with, let's say, the 5 rings?
Let me come back a little bit on that to answer that. If you have the fittest right leg in Italy, Bastiaan, if you end up with the fittest right leg in Italy, better than anybody, does that make you the best runner? If you have the fittest lungs, but not the fittest legs, right? Right? If you've got the best hair, right? How can an operation that is good in one thing, but not good across the piece, be really good? Now, I was working for the government, I said, for nearly 30 years, trying to help Irish business. We don't have a business in Ireland. We've lots of different sectors, lots of different sizes, lots of different scales and challenges, from service, software, food, all the rest, manufacturing, engineering, software. So the first thing I wrote was an introduction to world-class manufacturing. That will tell you how far back I go in this game. And then I began to realize that people didn't want to read books. But my thinking was evolving. I did applied benchmarking for competitors. I thought it was very clever, A, B, C, the simple steps. But 3 different levels, introductory, intermediate, and advanced. I got an idea of a spiral of improvement, not PDCA, but look, see, understand, think, and do again and again and again. And as you built capability, you could do more because you understood more. So you moved up the spiral. Now, I know it's a helix, but in Ireland, we like spirals, so I call it the spiral of improvement. And then I realized that service companies couldn't understand the thinking. And I said, why did I not get this? So I changed all the examples in the little booklets, and I began to write a ladybird book, a little booklet, Becoming World Class. And I took all the examples out and put in examples from service companies, from processing invoices through to whatever, HR development, but just put in service company examples. And straight away, the service companies went, oh, I get it. The example was something they knew, so it was possible for them to understand it. This is because I couldn't have good manufacturing companies if their administration sides, the design side, procurement, logistics, cash management, if they were bad, how was the business going to be good? If the creativity wasn't good, how could we do it? So that was in my head. So I wrote a book called Lean Service, which literally took all the examples and put in service examples. And oh, this makes sense. And I'm going, it always made sense, but you had to bring it into language of the recipient. So now I'm down with my friend Luciano Massoni in Turin, and Luciano asked me to visit an automotive company invited me to the south of an individual country to meet the senior directors of Fiat Alfa Romeo Iveco. Right? And I came in and I put on my best suit, arrived into Rome in my best suit, and the driver to pick me down and bring me down to Melfi made me look like a tramp. I looked as if I'd slept in the suit for a week, comparison to the Italian style of the driver. He drove down, brilliant driving, through the snakes from Naples out to Melfi, right? On the phone to the wife, maybe the girlfriend, who knows, maybe 2 of them, I don't know. Right, drinking his coffee, going through roads at 160, 180 kilometers an hour. I wouldn't be able to think of driving them at more than 80, right? Brilliant. Next day, 16 directors and Keegan. And I said, in Ireland, Fiat stands for Fix It Again, Tony. And they said, we know, that's why you're here. We spoke until 10 o'clock that night. And then they involved in the world-class program that Massoni has led in Fiat and now in Stellantis in the training in Turin. Fantastic effort over many, many years. But about 10 years after the first visit, Luciano asked me back. I came into Turin And I'm delighted. His office is much bigger now, loads of people working for him now. And God forgive me, what about this? Did you think about that? Did you look? He showed me something, how they had restructured. And they had sales, production, and design, engineering, all talking to each other, two-way communication, and the customer and the company at the center of that triangle. I said, that looks very interesting, but what if you went to a commutated circle where the sales, the engineering, and the production were actually interlinked? You would have a 3 spot in the middle where you get the crossover. And I said, put that in a circle, which is the company and the customer. That's 4 circles. And then I said, as my thinking evolved, just messing with a piece of paper, your suppliers are with you, but not of you. Your suppliers are not inside the company circle, but they're a part of your circle. And I said, if you cross over between the suppliers with your manufacturing and your design, innovation, engineering function, you'll create 2 sweet spots. One sweet spot where the departments within the company are talking together and really committed to each other, with each other, for each other. And one with the supply chain where you're committed with, for, and to each other. And go back to the evergreen, go back to the supply chain issues we're currently having. Toyota have been the least affected by the supply chain issues globally in the automotive sector. Why? I think a bit of research would be helpful here, but my suggestion is because of the relationships they developed with their supply chain, because of the approach taken by the senior leadership, not to change demand based on today's sales, but to base on looking tactically and strategically and engaging with the supply chain on that basis in partnership, bringing stability to the relationship with the partnership. Now, there's always pressure for price, quality, and delivery, but there's also personal relationships and business relationships. So I drew those 5 rings down and I thought nothing else of it. I came back to Ireland. I met a senior director of a consultancy house, a finance house. He said, I've never seen it represented like that, Richard. I laughed. You must have. You must have. I showed it to a friend of mine, a business guy, Paul Neville, who had fought judo for Ireland and had gone to Japan to study judo, to play. He got a job as a salaryman in Japan and was improving his judo. He'd given me a book by Musashi called The 5 Rings. Now, Musashi was in his late 50s, early 60s, late 50s. He said, I've been fighting with sharp knives all my life and I'm still alive. I must have learned something. Now, this is a Keegan version of it, paraphrasing. He said it much better in the book. But in 1592 or something like this, he wrote this book, The 5 Rings. Actually, it's the 5 spheres, but we call it the 5 rings. And he said, if you want to survive, firstly, you must know how to walk. You must know how to stand. You must know how to breathe. You must know how to listen and hear and use your senses. But when it comes to sharp knives, you must protect your head from the center, left and right, your body, left and right, the 5 spheres. And I showed Paul Neville the 5 rings I'd done for Luciano Massoni in Fiat Chrysler at the time. And Paul looked and he says, Richard, you just drawn the 5 rings of lean. I hadn't seen it. And the reference to Musashi, an old guy who had maybe picked up some things, not knowing much, but maybe had picked up some things, maybe sharing back what he had learned. And I thought no more of it, but I went away from Paul's in the west of Ireland, very happy. I came home and I was riding the motorbike the whole way back. This was on Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 6 o'clock in the morning. I came up down to my office and I wrote another set of 5 rings. And the starting point was not the starting point, but it came out. Vision and values. Who are you? What are you? What are your principles? What are your people? What's your structure? And what are your tools? And it went on with another number of 5 sets of 5 rings. But to me, that's right to show people. If the sales guys are not selling what you have and not feeding back what the market wants, needs, or the unspoken needs of the market, your designers will never make it. If the designers are making everything they want, but nothing the market wants, you'll never sell it. if they put in all sorts of varieties of bits and pieces in it, blue, pink, polka dot, stainless steel, sourced from one facility in Peru, you'll never be able to buy it effectively. If the manufacturing guys are not trying to help the sales and help the design, and vice versa, you'll never be effective. And if you don't engage with your supply base in a respectful way, and I talk about respect and challenge, you know that, Nigel, right?
Yeah.
I talk about the principle in time, money, and effort based on respect and challenge. There's another set of 5 rings. And just that Sunday morning, the rings just came out of me. And it was an effort to put simple language to let people realize they need to work as a team, as a gang, as a group. The enemy is usually outside, not inside the company. And how do you do that? And I said, well, it has to be respectful, but it also has to be challenging. So the principles worked, the people worked, right? Fair, firm, and consistent, right? All I now know are principles within Toyota, Nigel, but this is a naive guy who has never been trained in JKK, who has never actually done the 5-day practical problem solving course, right? Right? But these are the fundamentals. Now, I've seen them applied again and again and again, where I don't just research, actually help companies. And it's your, as you were saying, Nigel, before we started, we're on the ground with the safety boots on. I was that engineer that Toyoichi Ono drew the circle on the ground and said, stand in that. I didn't know this, but I stood for hours inside a protective frame on a sweet wrapping machine, trying to see the machine running at speed and see what was happening. These will always be valid if we're dealing with problems going into the future. But I thought the 5 rings was very clever because I just read Musashi and then I realized, hey, I've written it. But the thinking, I think, is simple, but it's deep at the same time.
You know, I'm just going to add to this because the 5 rings is something that a lot of Agile folks talk about. Because Jeff Sutherland used to talk about it, and these sort of old historical texts are very relevant. And Richard did a fantastic job of explaining a lot of the things there. But I mean, I just wondered when he was talking about spirals, because of course my own work is helixes and interconnected helixes, yeah. And I was wondering, and somebody asked me a few weeks ago, and I have the book at home, and it's spiral dynamics. So spiral dynamics is all about society, humans, you know, respect, and about, you know, model and language and all the things that that Richard was talking about. But if you want to bring back the Agile element into the TPS element now, a lot of what Rich is talking about is working with your suppliers equitably, challenging them, but actually integrating and interconnecting with them. Of course, the Japanese are great. There's a word called karetsu, which is sort of loosely translated as consortium, and Toyota's karetsu is extremely tight knit. The relationships between the companies go back decades. They sit on each other's boards. They work with each other, support each other. It can make decision making slow. That's a negative aspect. This Japanese word nemawashi, which is consensus building, it means preparing the soil, but that can take an immense amount of time. But once you make decisions, then everybody will work to implement and focus on making those decisions successfully. But things like the supply chain and the supply chain challenges the rest of the world have seen has been less felt by Toyota because of those deep relationships, as Richard mentioned. But the Agile element, what that brought in was the importance and necessity for continuous rapid feedback from the customer. Talk to the people who buy your products and services and understand what they want, but implement change rapidly. Don't take 3 years to update a model of a vehicle or in-car entertainment. Toyota were late to the game in the sort of Apple CarPlay, Android Auto space. But Toyota Connected implemented a lot of Agile working because I was lucky enough to be part of that at some point. And the people have done some fantastic things subsequently, you know, since I left. And they were able to actually have real customers coming to the offices of Toyota on a weekly basis for a period of months, and actually had them play with prototypes and give continuous feedback. So the stuff that's in the cars now is the stuff that people actually said they wanted, versus just some corporate executive making a decision this was how it was going to be. And so that's the Agile thinking. The TPS thinking, of course, there's lots we could talk about for hours about and we've covered some of the topics on that. Bringing the two together, you actually start to be able to execute the PDCA cycles from Toyota, excuse me, too much talking, and be able to execute those cycles really rapidly to get the feedback. So Toyota's giving you the techniques, the methods, the tools of this, the way we should implement things and continuously improve. And the Agile world brought in this recognition that we need to listen to people and respond really rapidly. But that DNA of Toyota that goes back decades was really what the Agile pioneers were trying to pull out of Toyota and implement beyond the walls of Toyota in the sort of, the software industry and now the digital industry. And all I did was sort of just make sure people saw the interconnections between them. I'm just throwing one other thing. My work now has taken me to something called assemblages theory. Assemblages theory has been around for a few years. And to give you a sort of a very simple description of this, an assemblage doesn't mean a collection of things. In assemblages theory, it doesn't mean just bring a bunch of tools together. And what people tend to do is go grab a bunch of tools, stick a bunch of tools together and expect magical things to happen. And they wonder why it doesn't work. And that's the one of the challenges with copying Toyota. Oh, there's a load of tools there. And I often say there's no tools, there's only behaviors, and that's part of the problem. But assemblages theory looks actually at how different things act together, react and interact within a contextual situation. So you have to understand the context. We talked about the Ono circle. I talked about standing there. I spent hours yesterday watching a production line, just watching it, filming it, observing it, and understanding what was happening to look for the improvements, to look for where we had opportunity to make things better. And that's a lot of the time you spend your time just watching things. But then you start to look at that context and you look at the tools, the techniques, the methods and approaches we have, which might work in that context. And it's how they actually interconnect and interact and react with each other within that context. Same tools in a different context will work differently. And even in the same organization, there's multiple contexts. So that's where I got this idea of this triple helix from. It's the interconnections between them, but it is based on assemblages theory. And that's where I'm extending some of the work I'm now doing with this whole flow system thing, because I'm trying to push it, the boundary out. And what I'm hoping to do in the work I'm doing currently in Washington State is actually test a few of those things out in that most traditional of production facilities. Apart from the lean things, bring in some of these other things to see what really works and to test the madness. So there's so much cool stuff we could talk about around this, but everything Richard is saying, I'm 100% supporting.
I also quickly have to look a little bit at the time where, let's say, we're already about 60 minutes into our conversation, but it's very, very nice, let's say, that there's so much to talk about and so much to learn. And that for sure is also, let's say, a nice cliffhanger towards our summit. But let's say what I take away from this is that basically we're saying is that lean or TPS is as valid as it has ever been. And maybe, let's say, the context of today, the complexity is basically kind of offering a bit of an Ono circle to ourselves by saying, did we really create the lean DNA within our company that we're supposed to be have doing, so to speak. So I think, let's say, also during the summit itself, we can let's say, continue to talk about how we actually should do that. And I really like, let's say, the circles of Richard, and for sure they're going to be an input for discussion. Let me quickly wrap up this webinar. I'll share my screen again. Here we go. Because of course, first of all, guys, I want to thank you really for your time today and the discussion that we had. So thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Richard, for this. Of course, also for the participants who are listening right now, but also probably will see us online. The invitation is there. Please come and join us at our summit on the 11th of October in Florence. If you want to have more information with regards to the summit, please go to lean2022.com. You will find all the information there. And it's just a click away to either secure already your seat or maybe put yourself on the mailing list to get informed of or about all the pre-events that we're currently organizing. Just to let you know one thing, right after the summer break, we're going to have another webinar with John Shook, of course, famous regarding the book Learning to See, all about value stream mapping. So join us for that one as well. Actually, what I can announce already is that recently we have extended our summit to something that I think can be called a week full of learning. Recently we joined, or we created a partnership also with the Italian Agile movement. So basically what is going to happen is we have on Tuesday, we have our summit with, of course, you as speakers. On Wednesday, Dave Snowden will remain for a masterclass. I think that's, of course, a unique occasion to have him in Italy. He doesn't visit often. Another unique occasion is, of course, Nigel, you're going to teach us the flow system on Thursday and Friday. And then on Saturday, you will do also a keynote in Brescia during the Italian Agile Day. So let's say I think that for everyone, there's a huge opportunity to discuss and to learn. And of course, with regards to the summit, we chose to go to Florence, not only because for Richard and Nigel, it's a beautiful place to visit, and I know you both will bring also your wife, so it's a beautiful place to visit, and also the home of Marco, but it's also the home of the Renaissance. So let's say, what other city could we have chosen to really to spark, let's say, thinking about how to create a new organization or to improve or innovate your organization. So please join us at the week full of learning, starting with the summit on the 11th, the masterclass of Snowden on the 12th, Nigel on the 13th and the 14th, and of course also the 15th in Brescia. So that was it. Thanks everybody for joining. Marco, I don't know if you would like to add a couple of words in Italian, just also for the Italian participants.
No, short thing, solo many thanks to all participants, and particularly to you for the manager of fantastic manager of the webinar, and last but not least to Nigel and Richard for the fantastic engagement in this webinar. I wait for you in Florence, okay?